It's interesting. I'm seeing more and more how, and I do this too, there's like two stories going on all the time. And a lot of clients come to me, and I get to this place too some days, some moments, where they're not able to see both stories. And in my experience, if you can't see both stories, life's way more, well, it's harder. And the stories I'm talking about are the fact that there's the you experience via your thought. There's the you experience as Kate Barsby or whoever you are, going about the world, doing your thing. And that's, well, it can be a lot of fun, but it often doesn't feel like a lot of fun. You know, that's the you that, you know, that feels anxious before you have to give a talk, that feels joyous, maybe in conversation with a really lovely friend, or looking at a beautiful view, or just feels all the things that you feel as you go through life. And that's like the best and most amazing gift, that we get to experience all those different feelings. But some of them can feel overwhelming and hard to negotiate or live with. Or I was just thinking now, even for bipolar people, maybe even the feelings of ecstasy and joy can almost be overwhelming and too much to live with. It's not just about the negative feelings I'm talking about. But the second story that, you know, we can miss, particularly in the way we've been educated to use our intellect most of the time to understand our experience, to understand life, to negotiate life, is the story that's really impossible to talk about with words, but I'm going to try with the words I've got to explain it at the moment, which is the miracle that's happening behind all of this, the miracle that is powering all of this. And when I remember that story, and I remember the place from where all of my other story, the Kate Barsby story, is originating from, it's easier for me to see that the only reason I'm ever struggling with life is when I've got caught up in this idea that somehow Kate Barsby is a separate story from this other story that I'm talking about. And that separation that we get to experience, you know, the fact that there are two stories in play, in the way, it's just the way I'm explaining it, it's not necessarily the right words, but the fact that there are those two stories in play is a miracle in itself and a gift in itself. But it's when we forget that both stories are one, if you like, that there really is only one story, but that we get to have the fun of experiencing both stories. Because if we didn't have both stories, I'm not sure there'd be any experience at all. But it's when we get really caught up in the fact that the two stories are separate, the miracle behind life and then Kate Barsby, that they're separate. It's when I fall into that illusion, when I believe that there's two separate stories, or I even forget about the other story and totally caught up in the Kate Barsby story, that I find myself suffering. And the more that I've seen that there isn't actually any separation. We just get to experience the fun of the fact that there is, or not the fact, but the illusion that there is. It's like, well, for me, the way I've experienced that is it just takes a load off, because one realises that second story, the story of Kate Barsby, for the illusion it is, for the beautiful, innocent, gentle illusion that it is. Even when it feels not at all gentle, and it feels difficult, and it feels like I have to work out life and I have to do it from in here, which isn't hugely big. that I have to try and solve whatever's in front of me, or come up with an idea to deal with whatever it is I'm struggling with. That's tough, seriously tough. And that feeling of toughness is all part of how it's supposed to be as well. But I guess what I'm trying to point to, as much for myself as for anybody else, is that when you really look, it's not possible for the Kate Barsby story to exist without the other story that I'm talking about, without the big story. And because it's not possible for Kate Barsby to exist without that story, then that story has to exist. And therefore it's not just Kate Barsby talking now, it's that story talking now, the other story. And that story gets to have an expression in this world through this illusory story of Kate Barsby. I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well. It's not an easy thing to talk about at all. But when we miss that there's that other story, that it isn't just this story, that I've got all that stuff in that other story, the miracle of life, when I know I've got that riding, working for me, it certainly takes a sense of, oh man, I have to work it all out by myself. It takes that away, and for me, that's what's changed my life over the last few years. That's what's brought ease and a sense of everything's okay, even when it really isn't looking like it on the outside. And for me, that's been hugely transformative and brought me a sense of enjoyment of this story, of the Kate Barsby story, that I just could not access before. That I didn't know was there, so I missed it.